This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 470, recorded on November 27th, 2020. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way in your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. We had great weather for Thanksgiving, and of course, we'll post the show with a few show notes, a lot of conversation tonight, and so I don't think we'll have too many links, but of course, you can get access to the full transcript and a little summary of some of the things we talked about out at the AverageGuy.tv. For this show, just put in put slash and then HGG470. Big thanks to Hover for supporting us on tonight's episode. Of course, you can go out to the AverageGuy.tv/Hover, purchase a domain. Sammy, do you have a domain yet? Have we gotten you one?
We have some.
I think I had one for you at one point in time, right? We let it go.
A while back, but we have some in the bank for a potential future brand.
Some ideas of domains, right? Yes. And I think we had like the Average Girl or something like that. By the way, is that
the AverageGirl.me, I believe, was the domain that I had.
And before we do the Hover thing, it's 2020. Is the average guy, is that a gender problem? Do I have a
no?
Am I okay?
You're okay with having a gender, Dad.
Okay, but I mean, I know, but like, is that
You're allowed?
Okay,
no.
all right, good. All right, I just want to make sure because
you're allowed to identify with your own gender.
I know, but is that for the ladies? We have this idea of identification with it. Is it a problem?
You don't call your audience the average guys. So
it's true.
No, it's not
all
weird.
Right. Of course, good enough. If you want a domain, and we're going to be buying Sammy a new domain this summer. We're going to talk a little about that here in just a second. You can head out to the AverageGuy.tv/Hover, save $2 on your first domain that's out there if you're a new customer. You support the show when you do that, so I appreciate it. Again, check it out, the AverageGuy.tv/Hover. If you need to, here we'll just put this up and let it sit there for a second. Then you can partner it with Maple Grove Partners. So you get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting for that site. Of course, that's Maple Grove Partners. You can go out to maplegrovepartners.com. Christian has plans out there for as little as $10. Head out, maplegrovepartners.com. Pair it with the AverageGuy.tv/Hover. Support us in what we do. We appreciate that as well. Thanks for doing that. Sammy is back. It's her fourth show. So the hat trick is over. You're on number 4. Sammy, welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Thanks for having me again.
Good to have you. We just got through a pretty awesome Thanksgiving. I checked you've been on 3 shows now. I think 403, 425, and 454. 425 was last year, the 29th, 2019, November 29th. And I went back and looked at the transcripts. We didn't talk about Thanksgiving at all. And that is for me, that's the pinnacle of my dad duties, right? Of cooking the bird and making sure everything's perfect. We had most everybody over and tried to practice as much. Everybody kind of tried to do their best the week before to make sure we weren't spreading COVID around. That's kind of one of those things you need to do now, I think, as we think about that. Okay, so I posted in the Discord group a picture of the turkey. You saw it. You actually make the bacon weave.
I do the legendary bacon weave every year, and this one, dare I say, was the best one yet. That thing was robust. We had the best technique so far for getting it onto the turkey in one piece, and it stayed, and it got nice and crispy because you did the different thing this year.
Yeah. So traditionally we would wrap it in tinfoil, leave a little hole around the top, and then it would just kind of bubble in the juices on there. And it was fine. It was always good. This year, we instituted a new brine. So 24 hours. Mark Robson, who's kind of our barbecue expert on Home Gadget Geeks, has been talking to me about brining a turkey forever. And so I finally put all the things together. We got a 20-pound turkey. I looked up the brining methods and kind of made up my own. A lot of salt, a lot of water,
Yes.
and then I think we mixed in some thyme and some other things in the water to make it work. I boiled it, so I got that water going, so it would dissolve the salt. Poured that in some cold water, kept it a certain temperature, brined it for the very first time. So tried to keep it below 40 degrees, just so that we wouldn't be encouraging things to grow in that water. Which it's only going to be out there for 24 hours, and it was outside too, and we it's been pretty chilly, so
Yeah.
wasn't too worried about it. But then, of course, you did the weave, and we put the bacon weave over the top. One of my family members said it looked like a sweater for the turkey, which is pretty great.
Beautiful.
It did look great. We roasted it because I've been roasting and smoking chicken on the grill and kind of open, not in a closed, but in an open kind of cooking position. The chicken's been really good.
Mhm.
And so I thought, well, let's just do that with the turkey. Samantha, I mean, I want to brag.
It was good.
Oh, it was so good.
Crushed it. Yeah,
Yeah, it
the
was so good.
secret is the bacon holds all the moisture in.
Yeah, I think it
You
helps.
don't get ridiculously dry white meat.
I think it helps. I did pour some Oktoberfest in with it as well, just to kind of get those flavors going. But no basting, no. I think with the brining, no. Mike, we'll hear from him next week. He was going to inject the butter. You know, that you can inject the butter into it. Do it that way.
That's the thing now, and also like putting butter under the skin. That's the trendy thing as well. Maybe at some point we'll try that.
Keeps things. No, actually, no. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think
No.
I'm going to work. I'm going to work the magic that we learned this year,
same thing.
which is just yeah, like. I think I'm pretty sure it was the brine. The low temperature, I never got above 300. So it was always between 225 and 250. A couple times I had a hard time regulating. I did run out of gas in the middle of it, so I had to switch tanks, and it got cool for a few minutes. But boy, you could really taste the smoke, and you could really taste the brine. And man, that was just freaking amazing. So Mark Robson, thank you for your tips on those. Many others who we've talked about this. We do have a barbecue section in the Discord group. If you haven't joined us over there, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. If you want to jump in there, we've got a barbecue beer. We've got a fitness, which hasn't lately, probably needs more, but hasn't been getting much traffic. Ham radio. Some content suggestions are there. We got a bunch of topics if you want to jump in Discord. theaverageguy.tv. So thumbs up on Thanksgiving, Sammy?
Delightful.
What was your favorite part? What do you like besides the turkey, which let's just say is far and above everything else? But what comes in second for you on
food wise or like the day wise?
Just the day, maybe, whatever.
I liked everybody sitting around in the backyard on the deck, just chilling.
Yeah, we lit a few candles. That's our code. Candles are our code word here because we don't want to get thrown off YouTube. They've been a little aggressive about those kinds of things. So we lit some candles and enjoyed the time with each other. That was your favorite time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's always good at Collison House. So we had a good time. Today was kind of a down day, and I was telling Sammy we probably could have gone a little earlier tonight to get this thing rolling, but we're here, and I'm glad we're here. I'm glad you're here. If you came out to join us live, thanks for coming out. Sammy, you spent, for folks that don't know, let's just do a little bit of a recap because you've been on a bunch, but not everybody has listened to those. Give me like 2 minutes on your background. What are you doing? Where are you at? What are you hoping for? Those kinds of things.
So I'm a senior at Northwest Missouri State University. I'm a journalism major, and I write for the news section at the Northwest Missourian. Newspaper is the thing that I'm trained in, but I also love new media. I love podcasting. So I'm hoping to get into that sphere come graduation time, which is the end of this upcoming summer, and I am not terrified at all.
Such good confidence. It's a little terrifying even under the best of circumstances.
Yeah, it's been a weird year for sure.
Yeah, and well, and there's you got a couple things going against you, if I can say it in that way. And one, not just the economy, which is pretty obvious, but journalism is under assault, right? I mean, it has been the last few years. it has been it's just been weird for journalists, and that
Yeah.
the industry has radically changed. We're
Mhm.
going to talk about this here towards the end of the show because I have some ideas. So I'm going to float some things by you tonight on
Yeah.
some things for your future. So hang tight for that as well. But it has really, I mean, I think journalism has really taken it on the chin. Is it, and if there's ever an area that's had to pivot, Jeff Katurba, right? Our friend Jeff, he is a cartoonist or was a cartoonist for the Omaha World Herald, which is our newspaper here in town, been around for 1,000,000 years. And he's been a cartoonist there for, I don't know, what do you think,
As
20,
long as I can remember.
20, 25, 30 years, something like that. He's been a long time and a friend of the family. And Jeff's a great guy, but they let him go. And so Jeff pivoted and is now on Patreon. And I think it's gonna do okay. Like I think he pivoted pretty fast. He must have got some good advice.
Yeah, and he and his son are doing a collaborative cartoon on their own.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I think Sammie, I think Jeff's a good example as we think about where we're going to go with you and how we kind of launch your career. I think that's a little bit of a model. So we'll save that here towards the end of the show. I want to talk to you a little bit about the election and not necessarily the politics of it, but the kind of the mechanics that went into it. You as a journalist on campus going through that. Give me a little bit of a run up. What was it like running up to the election for you guys as a paper?
So yeah, we're in a pretty small college town in northwestern Missouri, and there's only one other newspaper in town, and we're both weeklies, so we're even competition with each other. And so this year we really wanted to make sure our election coverage was stellar, knock it out of the park, especially since we weren't able to print physical papers this semester because ad revenue was down due to COVID. And so we've been shifting so much into our online sphere. And so we ran a bunch of prep stories ahead of time and really delved into the down ballot candidates and issues and covered those thoroughly. So that way people knew what they were voting for once they got their ballots. Especially since a lot of people were voting early, we had to start so much sooner than we normally would. Like we started covering stuff in early October because I turned my ballot in mid late October. And so we were covering ballot issues and local elections. And then when it came to election night, it's really a huge team effort, especially between me and the news editor, Kendrick, with him at City Hall, or was it the county? It was the county admin building, and me in the newsroom. And so he's sending me live updates of city counts, and I'm putting them on social and on the website. And so like that truly newsrooms are a communal joint effort, and that's the thing that we don't want to lose in the midst of this kind of, I hate saying war on news and war on truth, but it is. And newsrooms are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and COVID is causing a bunch of people to have to work separately. But it was nice to have that classic newspaper atmosphere of us sitting around writing stories as we're getting results in. Especially with the big issues in our county were the sheriff's race and then some Missouri constitutional amendments.
Back in May of 2019, you were on. We talked a little bit about, is podcasting journalism?
Yeah.
You said yes. As a journalist, we talked a little bit about being fair, being trying to be not biased towards things. How? I mean, this was a pretty interesting election, to say the least.
For sure.
Especially at the national level. How do you continue to stay, whatever the word is that you want to use, neutral,
Impartial?
news, or impartial is probably the right word. How do you stay impartial in there while all that stuff's going on?
Well, I think the fortunate thing is that when you work in a smaller paper, you are not the authority on national issues, and so it's less of your job to write about the national issues. So you can kind of just like keep that off your professional mindset. Like we had it going on the TVs in the background, but that's not what we were writing about. That's not what we were tweeting about. And so it's so much easier to delve into the local elections and local ballot issues because we can interview those people. Like we, for the first time as a paper, endorsed a candidate the editorial board endorsed a candidate in the sheriff's race, because we had the opportunity to do thorough interviews with those candidates and make an educated, informed decision based on facts and truth.
Do you think newspapers should be endorsing candidates?
I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
I don't think it's always the most use, because the thing is, you want to do what's best for your audience.
Right.
And so if you are just introducing bias into your coverage, then it's not going to do much, and it's going to make your audience question your credibility. But in our case, we had a major issue of a candidate not telling the truth and not being transparent about their past. And so we felt it was our obligation to our readers. Well, I'm not on the editorial board, but I agreed with the editorial board's decision that we had to bring those issues to light. And in order to do that in a transparent way, it had to go on our editorial page. Like, it just made the most sense to just come out and endorse a candidate. But that is, in any other election year, it's not something that we do. We don't endorse candidates on the national level, and we usually don't endorse local candidates. But when it comes to something that there's a major kind of almost objective moral issue, then as somebody just straight up lying throughout their campaign, then sometimes it is useful to your readership to be like, this person is not telling the truth. Maybe you shouldn't vote for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Jim, this is, I think, the trap that you get into. And Jim says it doesn't see how it's possible to be unbiased if you're officially endorsing one candidate over the other. I think it is an interesting, it puts newspapers, it puts media in an interesting conundrum in the endorsing area. 4 years ago, you were a senior in high school, and the last major election. When you think about technology and the way you followed the election this year, how do you think it's different this year versus it was 4 years ago for you in your use of technology and just, keeping up? And maybe in some ways you don't think about it that way because it's just a part of what you do. But how do you think your use of technology to track things changed?
I don't think the technology itself was that different 4 years ago, but me knowing how to use it is a lot different, and thinking about what people want and what they want to see and how they want their information portrayed to them. We have learned a lot about how best to use our Twitter and Facebook accounts for those separate audiences. There's obviously, when it comes to a small town that has a college in it, there's huge demographic differences between our Twitter audience and our Facebook audience, as you can probably guess. And using the assets that are built into our website, we use what are the words? We use Town News, a CMS. That's what it's called. We use Town News as our CMS, and we have learned a lot about how to boost our engagement through search engine optimization and through social, using that platform, so that way we get further reach. All of the things we've learned through our editor-in-chief did a great internship with the Kansas City Star, where she learned a lot. We've had a lot of reporters be able to go to conventions recently and learn from experts. And so we just felt a lot more prepared going into this election, with a lot of us on the editorial board and in senior staff positions having so much more experience as underclassmen going into this year. We just felt more confident in our abilities and what we were doing, rather than just putting things in a print paper and hoping that people read it.
Well, and that's another interesting area that a paper has to worry about. You are trying to reach the most amount of viewers, readers as you can, right? Because you guys it's been a struggle, like every paper, for circulation, and you give out the paper, you give it away for free. And so you have to have advertisers, which means you got to prove to the advertisers it's going to get read, right? I mean, it puts us, hey, us podcasters are in the same spot. We want to attract advertisers when they give us things to review. You kind of want to give them you're tempted to be favorable towards it, just because you're like, well, they did kind of give it to me, type deal. So do you feel like there's a good separation between the advertisers and what you can say in the paper?
Yes, that is the one thing that I love about traditional journalism, and why I've stuck so hard to it is there is a definitive line between what is advertised content and what is editorial content. Like there's literally a dividing line across the middle of the page. And we don't do sponsored posts. We don't take gifts or sponsorships from businesses. And so it's like, this is what we're saying, regardless of what the people that are paying us say. There's always issues where sometimes you write something and an advertiser drops you. We had that happen with an on-campus organization who was advertising with us, and they stopped advertising with us because we were critical of them. But, you know, sometimes it's for the greater good of your audience. And that's just the line that you walk. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still afloat and we are printing this upcoming semester. We did get enough advertising revenue back. And so things turned out for us, but that's always a risk that you take, obviously.
We had you on in August, and we talked a little bit about kind of a summer of COVID and how that affected, you know, at that point you had been out of school since March. You had been home the whole time. We spent a lot of time together, and we talked about that in the August show. You went back though. And so how did things change, you know, between August? You went back we had you on right before you went back. How are things and how's the school responded with technology? I mean, how has it gotten? Certainly there are some classes that are remote, and you know that you're doing it online. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think our university was fairly well equipped for a situation like this because we already had fairly small class sizes. And so most classes switched to a hybrid schedule where every other class you go in person, and on the off ones you attend on Zoom. And that, I feel like, was the ideal situation for keeping class sizes down, keeping people spread apart, because we don't have huge lecture halls on campus because we don't have huge classes. Everything's a small class size. And so I think that's why we were able to stay on campus with pretty much at full capacity compared to a normal year. We had record enrollment again.
Wow. We kind of thought class was going to end. Like, I mean, you and I kind of had bets on how quickly you'd be back home.
And there was a spike of cases in the county, but those people isolated and the cases went down. They spiked a little bit towards the end of the semester, but it never got too detrimental. We were able to have good contact tracing, people wearing masks. People on campus were really good about wearing masks.
Oh, that's good.
I'm proud of my campus for people not pushing against that.
That's college students.
Advertising practices. Yeah.
You can always tell college students what to do, and of course they'll do it. Don't drink in the dorms. They definitely don't drink in the dorms, right?
For sure not doing it.
I don't see that happening. Did the university deploy any kind of new technology? Did anything kind of come out of this technology-wise that made the campus better?
I don't think so. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. We kind of already had things in place because we have been such a tech-forward campus for so long.
Do you feel like you learned as much this semester, so the fall, let's just throw out the spring because it was a mess, as you did last fall? So let's compare it to last fall, pretty normal semester. We didn't have this going on here. Do you feel like the experience was any better, less, different? Talk a little bit about if you compare fall to fall.
If you're just looking at my classes, same diff, same content. For the most part, same class structures. But I feel like as a media student, the classroom is not where you learn most of your stuff. It's in the newsroom and on the job. And that kind of did take a hit. Like a lot of my peers were hoping to slam into our senior year and bulk up our portfolios. And instead, we kind of stagnated because we couldn't be in the newsroom together most of the time. We weren't doing as much on the ground reporting. It was a lot of phone and Zoom and email interviews. And it just didn't feel the same as all being in the newsroom together, putting a physical paper together. And that kind of sucks. And that is what it is. And hopefully employers will be able to see that and consider that like we kept going during a hard time. And that was a detriment to the normal learning experience that we have as media students of working together and making a product together.
Yeah.
But, we persevere and we move on. Such is life.
Well, the portfolio, I think at the end of the day, your portfolio of what you did is actually what matters. And
Yeah.
you know, you've got an uphill battle to fight, but a lot do going, you know, getting I mean, it's going to be a pretty tough economy for the next year or two or three. I don't know how long it will last, but we got some tough days. Well, but you've got good support around you, so you'll do fine. Jim Shoemaker's got a couple comments that I want to get in here as well. He kind of feels like, go back to our previous comment about maybe endorsing a candidate. Every article that should start with a disclosure about the paper's position. When you're endorsing a candidate, are in the paper, are you pretty clear as far as you said you knew there were some things that had gone on with this candidate that just weren't right? I'm assuming when you're writing those things, you got to be really careful about that, right?
Yes. And endorsements are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
It doesn't say in our handbook that you can't endorse a candidate in our paper, but we don't do it 99% of the time. 99% of the time, we run news stories, we interview both candidates for positions. We run unbiased coverage for the sheriff's race. We did full in-depth profiles on both candidates. But this was really an exceptional circumstance in which it wasn't to say that both candidates were equally qualified and equally ethical would have been what we call a false equivalency, where you're elevating something to a level that it shouldn't be just because they're on two sides of an issue when one candidate had exceptional issues.
Mm-hmm. Could you do that same reporting without an official endorsement?
Yes. I think that if people had, it would have had a similar effect just running our profiles, but I think it did have the false equivalency problem. We run into the false equivalency problem. A good example is climate change, because if you give equal weight to the science that shows that climate change is a thing that is happening versus the detractors with their conspiracy theories, if you give equal weight to those things, you're doing a disservice to the public by giving weight to something that doesn't have as much factual basis behind it, and that's a problem. So that sometimes that happens. Most of the time that doesn't happen in politics, but in this case it did.
Well, especially at the local level, right?
At the local level, when you know these people and you know people, like the families of these people, it gets a lot more personal.
Yeah. I think
it's not just a matter of the issues.
It's at the national level. It's a little more. Oh, what's the word? It's a little more. It just doesn't. It's not like it's real, but when you're at
it's
the
really
local
separated.
level, yeah.
But at the local level, those things really matter to the people day to day, and so we get a lot more invested in our coverage in those things.
Jim mentions, he says some places are ending in the fall semester at Thanksgiving. Go home and stay homes. Northwest Missouri State. Man, I missed out. Yep. I could have wore the North. I should have worn my gear tonight. What was I thinking?
The colors.
I know you did well. Your schedule. Talk a little bit about that. What did the school decide to do this year with you guys?
Yeah, that's what our school did. We started at our usual time in August, but we ended the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then this upcoming week, what is normally dead week, which is a lot of projects being due, is a time to study for finals, and then we're all having online finals the week after this upcoming week. So I believe the first.
So you have one more week. This week coming up, starting Monday, is dead week.
Yeah.
And then you have finals coming up.
So it's all online. So people could come back to the campus if they truly had nowhere else to go, but most students went home to their families and are staying there until January.
And what do you think of that as a student?
At first it didn't make sense, but now it makes sense that you don't want to go home for Thanksgiving, catch COVID, and then take it back to campus. I think it is a challenge to sometimes stay focused and keep your head in the game when it comes to finals, especially with those. Like my roommate is the oldest of many siblings, and so like her house is a little more chaotic around the holidays because she has younger siblings running around. But I think it really was the best decision for most students to just stay in one place and keep the rest of the people healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it. I get you for 2 months instead of this. It saved me a couple trips going back.
Yeah, and I get to be with the family and the cats. Unfortunately, it's pretty quiet for me here for studying times.
Yeah, no, it's good. It saved me a couple trips. Didn't have to go back and forth to school, and
especially once it starts snowing and getting icy.
Yeah, keep you in the bubble. as well. I mean, for me, it's also nice knowing that I'm not sending you back with it, or or you're not going to, you don't have one more opportunity to get it and bring it back home.
Yep.
Right. So, so good stuff. Yeah. Cool. How do you feel? So semester's almost over. How do you feel about any other kind of thoughts around a new world order for the fall, just in how the school had to do it to kind of pull it all off?
I think that what are my thoughts? It's tricky to think about because it's so hard to combat the idea that this time was a waste. Like it just feels like I've been held back. But we gotta see it as one, we're doing the right thing by taking the right measures and keeping the spread of COVID down until we get vaccines widespread. And you just got to acknowledge that this is an exceptional time. Like there's nothing like this that has happened in a very, very long time. And so sometimes things suck, and like that's the reality of life. And hopefully everybody else that's going to be potentially hiring me and looking at my portfolio, or who I'm going to have to work with in the future, they all lived through it too. And they probably are sympathetic to the cause of the college student who had to work through all this and try and get a degree during this madness. But
Yeah.
we're all trying to stay as sane as we can.
Well, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself for that. And
As one does.
yeah, no, I get it. It's you to begin with, and you have to live with all this. I take a little more of a kind of it's all going to work out kind of methodology, right? Through this, and it'll be tough as we go through it. I mean, I think the good news is we'll get to go through it with you in a lot of ways, and so I think the good stuff's still coming. So I'm pretty excited about that. I want to transition a little bit into that idea of what's ahead. So I want to talk a little bit about the future for you. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of the stuff we do here. So I think it's going to tie in. I do want to remind the listeners just one more time, because this coming Thursday, we are going to be doing a special podcast celebrating 10 years of Home Gadget Geeks. And so Christian will be joining us. I got Andrew Morris back. Of course, Mike Wieger will be here, and myself, and a great opportunity to kind of celebrate what we've done over the last 10 years. I'd like you to do something for me. So when you get a second, go out to homegadgetgeeks.com. Bottom right-hand corner, there's a little microphone button. Just click it and leave me a 30-second voicemail about your whatever you want to leave for the show. How long you can say first-time caller or long-time listener. I don't really care what you put it. Well, no, I do kind of care. We're not necessarily looking for praise and recognition as much as I just kind of want to hear from you. So leave us a 30-second message. Head out to homegadgetgeeks.com. Leave us a message. That's coming up this Thursday. Sammy, I'm going to need to start blasting that a little bit farther and a little bit wider on social media to get folks to do that. But we'd love to have you do that for next week's show, next Thursday, December 3rd. And we actually 10 years ago recorded the show on December 2nd, and then I posted it on December 4th. So this lands smack dab in the middle. We'd love to have you do that. homegadgetgeeks.com. When we think about your future, and you've got one more semester. First of all, you got a semester and then a summer class that you have to take. How are you feeling about, now that you've made it through fall, how are you feeling about spring? You go into spring with some confidence of like, oh yeah, we got this. This is all doable. How do you feel like that?
I'm less anxious about the class aspect, for sure. Like once we've made it through this fall, it feels like we're through the worst of it. We kind of got a system down. We're probably going to keep going with hybrid classes because the nature of the beast is that we don't have a vaccine yet. So we got to all stay distance, keep our masks on, but we kind of got a groove down. It's the after the graduation part, the prepping for job hunting, figuring out real life and real world, taking the work onto my own shoulders instead of just learning through the school newspaper.
Yeah,
that's scary and exciting.
You've talked about that a lot lately. Like I've heard you're thinking about that a lot more. Is the weight of that bearing down on you a little bit harder now than maybe it was even last summer?
Yeah, it just feels real now. Like the I can see the metaphorical light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but like the end is in sight, and it's like I'm looking at my degree audit and I'm like checking off the classes, and it's like it's almost all the check boxes are full, and I'm gonna have to take
Mhm.
senior seminar and get my resume together and do all that stuff, and it feels like it's time. It's like all of a sudden it snuck up on me, and I'm like, ah, it's senior year now. It's almost over.
I tell people all the time, I didn't really, my career didn't even really start till 30, you
Hmm.
know, and yeah, I tell tech students this all the time, when I meet with them, because everybody feels like that first job, like just getting that first job is a big deal. And of course, I did 6 years of military, or 5.5, let's say, and then spent some time going to college and worked at the bank. And thought I'd maybe go into retail banking. And then we thought maybe we would do some church ministry stuff for
Hmm.
4 years or so. And it really wasn't till the year 2000 that I got this tech job. And I thought, man, I'm actually good at this. Like, I should be doing more of this. And I took the tech job not out of thinking I wanted to have a tech career, but out of desperation. Kind of, I had taken a job selling computers in '98. That's when computer prices went from $5,000 a computer to $500 a computer. In those 2 years, I was working for Computer Renaissance. We saw the AOL, free sign up for 2 years and get a free computer, which drove computer prices to the bottom. Like, they went literally from $2,000 or $3,000 to almost free, or free in
Hmm.
some cases. You had to, it's like buying a cell phone. You had to take an obligation on.
Yeah.
In that job, I thought I could make some money, and I couldn't. And I took a job back with the bank, and their IT saved my life in a lot of ways. But I was 30 for that, 32 when that happened. However, I don't want to minimize to you. Like, it feels like everything is hinging on the first job.
Yeah.
And I think this audience, this audience has been around a while. I think they would collectively tell you it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
However, that's easy to say, not easy to live through, that you're living
Hmm.
through. So I want to spend the rest of the time, and I'm looking for the chat room, because we got some wise individuals out there thinking about this. So we're going to talk about this collectively. One of the things you and I have been talking about right out of the gate, like,
Hmm.
I honestly believe that your future is going to be almost exclusively as a freelancer. Like, if you're going to stay in journalism, I just think freelancing is going to be the way it is for the future. And I think freelancing today, at least the models I've seen, is a lot of writing and some podcasting. And so you and I have been kicking around different ideas for podcasts. How do you feel about, I mean, you do great on these podcasts, but how do you feel about having your own podcast?
I think there's a lot of pressure to find the right thing, and I think once I let go of that pressure and just start making stuff, it'll come a lot easier. That I gotta let go of the idea that I have to have the right idea, the right podcast concept immediately, and just start talking
Yeah.
into the ether. And I think things will fall into place, and I'll figure out what I want to say or the types of people that I want to talk to. But right now, it's nailing down those ideas of what is the idea that I want to portray,
Yeah.
because there's so much that I care about, and I'm like, how do I pick a thing? Making decisions has never been my strong suit.
Yeah. Well, that's what you have me for. So I'm going to
Yes.
help you. I'm going to help you make some decisions on this as we move forward. Well, it's, 10 years later, it's easy to say, well, Home Gadget Geeks was the thing, right?
Yeah.
That it made sense. Well, when 10 years ago, when we started it, I didn't know it'd be a thing.
Mhm.
I didn't know it'd make it 10 years. We had Home Tech at the time. That was the name of the show at the time. And then I started Fitness Tech. I did a financial tech podcast. I've done Silicon Prairie News Minute in there. I did Rich's Random Podcast Generator. That was more Rich than it was me doing that. But we tried all these different things just to see what would stick.
Mhm.
Certainly before Home Gadget Geeks was even Home Service Show, which survived for a
I
while. We had
remember
Surface
that.
Geeks. Dave did Surface Geeks for a while. I think you're right. I think The wisdom is just trying a bunch of things
Mhm.
and see what's successful. Let's talk about what the work I've done at Gallup. Like, yeah, we started with Called to Coach, but it was really Theme Thursday that eclipsed them all, right? And that was the
Mhm.
second one, right?
Yeah.
Out of it,
Theme
we've
Thursday
tried.
is the thing.
Yeah, well, we just crossed 1 million on that show. We just did our millionth download a couple weeks ago on that one. And you start going, man, 1 million of anything is pretty great. But we've tried some other ones in there, and some of them have been successful, and some of them haven't. I think it's a good. I think you're thinking along the right lines. I think we should come up with a good idea
Mhm.
and then just do it and just see
Yeah.
just kind of see what happens, right? Just do some things.
Mhm.
I remember you knew Callie Lewis. You met
Yeah.
her, Loria. She she started Geek Beat, Geek Brief. Well, I can't remember even what the name of it was. It's evolved 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And the very early versions are awful. They're just terrible, from 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. But she's, and she went through some progressions, did some things differently. If you think about, so let's think about, like, if you were to kind of pick a topic today that you think you'd be most comfortable, what do you think that'd be?
I don't know. I also feel like saying it out loud is jinxing it. That's another thing that hangs on the back of my mind is I feel like saying it out loud curses it to being
Oh,
awful.
yeah.
It's a weird
Yeah.
superstition that I have.
But that's a failure to get out of the way.
Yeah.
Like, then you kind of know, okay,
Fair
well,
enough.
that one's not going to work. I think that's kind of the magic in this and listen, I'm not going to force you to answer that question,
Mhm.
but I think the magic in this is knowing that you got to progress through a bunch of kind of things to see. Listen, I've wanted to quit this show dozens of times in the 10 years that I've done it. I've probably quit on Wieger 4 or 5 times, and just in the times he's been on, at least once a year I go,
Mhm.
I think we're at the end of this thing. And
Yeah.
he doesn't try to talk me out of it. That's the funny thing. He's like, well, okay. I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me think about it for a week or two, and then I'll tell you. And then something changes, and I always go, I always go back to it. I'm like, no, let's continue to do this. And you have a 10-year anniversary, and you're like, this is pretty great. And I'm lining up guests for after the anniversary. So, those along those lines, sometimes you just got to kind of keep going. Jim says 2 key concepts to getting a first job: your network of connections to get great references and tips, and your willingness to move to get a job. You're not unwilling. You'd go anywhere, right? For a job.
What was that? Sorry, I
You'd
was reading
go.
a comment.
That's okay. You'd go anywhere for a job, right? I
Yeah.
mean, your willingness to
I'm
move.
I got nothing tying me down right now.
Yeah. Yeah. The other Jim says freelancing will imply tracking payments and filing taxes. You do kind of have to, if you're a freelancer, you got to figure those, you're self-employed from
Yeah.
that standpoint. Jim says podcasting for a living seems like it would be very tough, better as part of a whole online presence about something, podcasting, websites, advertising, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Jim, I agree with you. I think I think in the freelancing gig, podcasting is just the very first step. That's kind of why I started with it. I
Yeah.
think that's today journalists need to have some kind of presence, whether it's a podcast or something along those lines to be out there with. I think it's a part of the component. Some can make it work full time. Others can't. I don't think that's the point. I think part of it is building your resume with your own podcast. I think was my point to get started. That's where I come
And
in, and
it's kind
and
of
I
like
know.
a home base for your personal brand is what a podcast kind of is.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a go-to of this is who you are. This is what your voice is beyond just what you sound like the words coming out of your
Yeah,
mouth, but like
yeah, yeah.
what you care about, what you think about, what you have to say.
The example that I use or that I think about when I think about what you're doing, of course, is Mary Jo Foley from Windows Weekly, a show I listen to a lot of. She's not the only example. Molly Webster. There's a bunch of Veronica who we had on the show here. There's a bunch out there. I think of Mary Jo in the sense that she still writes a ton Paul
Mhm.
Thurrott does this as well. You've listened to Windows Weekly
I have
with
listened to a
me.
fair amount of Windows Weekly.
You know those voices.
I do.
Mary Jo does both print and then joins Paul for that podcast. She kind of fell into that podcast 10 years ago. I don't think she ever intended to be a podcaster, but it's become part of her kind of portfolio. I kind of, since we can and you'll have time, I kind of want to start you going on that so you to help build your portfolio and also to have some things to write about while you're looking and doing, because I think that's going to be just a part of your role in the future regardless. And maybe you don't stick with that podcast very long. Maybe it lasts a season or 2 or 3 and then you move on to something else. But I think having that skill, having that online presence, having that ability to be on the mic and answer questions and have that persona, I think for journalists are super important.
Yeah. These days, it is the multimedia that people want, an ability to being able to write well. They want you to be able to vocalize well and speak and be confident with digital media and new media.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think you'll find, I think that gives you some opportunities to find your voice and that find what kind of fall in. I think for me, you know, I get a lot of folks now who give me feedback and say, "Oh, I love listening to what you do," and some of those kinds of things. And I realize, well, I've been doing it for 12 years. Like I have a lot of practice doing it. I have a lot of you know, a lot of water under the bridge. So when you think about writing, then because I think it's kind of a 1-2 punch. I think you have to do both podcasting and let's call it media from that standpoint, whatever that means, whether it's being a YouTuber or being on, you know, any of the other platforms, Instagram or TikTok or any of those other ones. When you think about writing though, what kind of energizes you? What kind of things do you like to write about? Where do you think your sweet spot in writing is?
That was a good question. I think, I don't know. I just like the talking to people aspect of it, and learning new things through people, and writing is an outlet for that. And so I think that's why I'm so drawn to podcasting is it's like whatever medium grants me the ability to talk to people and learn new things, I'm down for it. Because I'm so curious about people and the world. And I'm the person who falls down YouTube and Wikipedia rabbit holes in the middle of the night. Because there's just so much to know. And that sounds like a generic answer, but it's the truth.
Any topics, anything that you lean towards more than others as far as what do you feel like you're being drawn to when you're writing? This is a foreign world for me. I hate writing. Like I hate it.
Oh, I love writing.
So, right. I mean, you and I are the same person in a lot of ways, except in this area. Like you love it and I hate it. Any areas you're kind of drawn towards?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm the worst under pressure.
Well, what are some of your favorite stories? Like, what are you most proud of? What have you written that you're most proud of?
I think there was sort of a capstone project that I did, was it last year? Where I talked to 2 students at Northwest who are transgender, and who got disowned by their families, and both had to start GoFundMes in order to live and transition to adulthood and living on their own. And following them through that process and kind of walking in their shoes was a really good experience for me, and I feel like people learned a lot through reading that. It was just kind of like guiding people through their shoes of what that experience was like.
Okay. So I think, and I think as you say that, I mean, you have some, you know, you have Relator high, right? In your top 5, your Clifton Strengths top 5.
Well, Relator, I think, is in my top 10.
Yeah.
Empathy is for sure in my top 10.
And you have individualization as well?
Number 5.
Yeah, number 5. So I think the people aspect of things are what's important to you. Like I think you really like the personal stories, the areas of injustice when it's affecting a person. Right?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's when people who are down on their luck, the underdog story, that kind of stuff appeals a lot to me.
Yeah, so it's kind of about finding some of those spaces to write about. you know, to finding stories. You and I have been kicking around an idea of the idea of this may not really be true, you know.
That might not
So in
be
other
true.
words, yeah, that might not be true. Of these ideas that, you know, where people, these broad assumptions that are made culturally, or old wives' tales that have been, you know, old myths that have been out there, and then digging in to those and saying, well, they're not really true, and or it's possible they're not true, and here is why. You know, maybe the element, as we think about that, maybe the element to that is finding examples in real people for you. In other words, making it come in a way, not just the facts, but then finding people who will talk about this, because I think you're probably a better writer when it's real people as opposed to just the facts, so to speak.
That's for
I don't know.
sure.
What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
I like that. Things are pinging in my brain right now.
Yeah. Some ideas in that. We, you know, you and I talk about this all the time. And so you know, I've kind of been thinking about, I don't worry about, we get you home this summer, you still got to finish a class. You know, I'll probably go hard and heavy after getting you some assignments, like, okay, here's some things we're going to do. Are you okay with this? Let's move forward. I'll help you move forward with those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So one of those, I mean, I'm kind of, you know, now that I think about this, I love some stories for the average guy.tv that are personal in nature. So, you know, just kind of thinking through the technology bit, but from a personal standpoint, like, we don't get, you know, I hate reviews. I just hate them. I hate, like, you know, hey, here's, as an example, I bought something technology wise, and they sent me in the box this USB enabled light, and I need the battery to make this thing work. But you plug it into a battery and this lights up, and it's bendable, you know, you can use it like a reading light or whatever, you know, it's kind of cool thing. Well, you know, I could review this thing, but I hate doing those kinds of things. Like, I'm not a great reviewer. But you interviewing, you know, instead of you doing the review, you interviewing people around these kind of technology products or whatever, maybe a portfolio builder, right? Some things to write about, to build. You got a built-in audience. You don't have to start from scratch. You know, you get some of those. So by the way, I didn't think of that till just as we were talking about this right now.
Fresh idea just now, hot off the presses.
Maybe that's maybe for you, because you're so people oriented, maybe that's the way to move, you know, to move forward with it. So how do you feel about graduating at this point? Like, you know, you're really just a semester and some change away from graduating, besides the job thing for a second.
Yeah.
Like, let's just, like, okay, the job thing will always be there. It's always going to be there. How do you feel about graduating?
I think I think I'm ready for a new chapter. I think I've taken a lot out of my university experience, and I'm really grateful for it. But I think that it does looking back, it does feel like I am reaching the end of the university road in terms of experiences. Like, there's only so much that you can get out of university before you just gotta be pushed into the real world. But I am grateful, and I remember having conversations with you as a freshman, and I'm like, when you look at high school, when you look at yourself as a freshman in high school to a senior in high school, those are two completely different people. And I knew going into college, moving away from home for the first time, being an adult for the first time, having a real job for the first time, as much as a real job, whatever that is. But I knew being a freshman in college, I was like, I'm going to come out of the other side of this thing and I'm going to be different. And like, I just got to be ready for that. And I do feel that way. I do feel like that person that I was is not who I am now. And I'm grateful for the things that are making that difference.
Yeah, well, we've watched it grow over the last 4 years. I think I've had the most fun watching, don't tell the boys this, but you've been a lot more fun during college than they were. And well, they didn't all
I
go to school.
have the more traditional college experience of, like,
You
moving
did.
away from home and dorming and
Yeah. Yeah.
traveling
Well,
back and forth and
listen,
meeting
I'm,
people.
I'm glad I only had one to do, just to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure, Tim did the Marines and that was fantastic and great experience for him. And,
Mhm.
he's making that transition as well. Just wasn't as it was just different with you than it would have been
Yeah.
would have been for the boys. But I would agree with you. I mean, I feel it's like I'm in a privileged position to be able to kind of go through that with you. I've
Mhm.
learned things about myself through this. I think it's made me a better podcaster. Spending time talking to you about these topics and these things. I mean, I feel like I'm better at my craft because we've spent time together. So Jim asks in the chat room, I really don't want to ask this question, but any thoughts about going to grad school?
No, research is not my thing.
Mm.
I've never been good at it, I've never liked it, and, like, that's what the extended higher education, more degrees leads to, and that's just not my thing. That's my best friend's thing. They can do that, not for me. I would like to get out of academia and talk to people.
Yeah, well, I
As
mean, I
much as
think
academia can be a comfort zone, I need to get out of it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're gonna have you got a good shot at it. We'll have you back on the show in the summer when you get
Mhm.
back from it. And you got a summer class to wrap up, and you and I are going to launch some projects. I've been thinking through. I have this crazy ability to create all these different options, and some
Mhm.
of them will work, and some of them won't work. But I feel like I've been holding off. There's been things I've wanted to do with you, but just it would have not worked with you being in school. We
Mhm.
just couldn't have done them at the same time.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple years to figure that out. I kept kind of
Mhm.
prompting you and then never really went anywhere. And I
Just
was
didn't
like,
have the time or the
yeah,
bandwidth.
I remember it was like, I think last summer. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to wait. Like,
I'm just gonna wait.
I don't
Yeah.
have to do these things right now. I don't have to do these things. But I think once we get school out of the way, we got some excuses. Of course, you'll be looking for a job. So
Mhm.
some of those hopefully get preempted by that. But if, as you're looking and such, I got some ideas on some things we can try and do that are low risk that you just got to
Mhm.
do. You just got to try.
Yeah.
I think there's some things we can do here at the average guy.tv that'll give you a chance to experiment. Experiment, is that the right word? Yeah. It just that sounded funny when I said it.
Mhm.
Experiment on some things that are low risk for you to say, oh,
Yeah.
this worked, that didn't work. I can try it this way. I can try it that way. Um, so Jim asked the question, what does it take to be a manager in journalism? An MBA, 20 years experience? Do you want to run your own paper? I mean, like, if you were to think, Sammy, a dream job for you right now, like if you were to think about what would be the best possible getting started job for you, what would it be in today's journalism
The
world?
best starting job or the end goal?
No, let's start like let's be reasonable because
Yeah.
there's too much stuff 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Right now, if you were to kind of picture your best possible first job, what do you think it'd be?
Probably just writing in a newspaper, honestly. Like, that's what I'm set up to do, that's what my
Mhm.
skill set is. So, if there's a newspaper that'll take me, that lets me write news, that would be cool
Yeah. Do you
because I
think
love doing that.
does that exist today in today's world?
I mean,
Are
there's
there?
still newspapers.
Yeah.
There's less of them, but they still
Right.
exist.
Yeah. Well, the good news is you're completely movable. So,
True.
you can
Well,
apply to
also,
all.
writing for a magazine is also an option
Yeah.
because those get a lot more niche and allow you to become more of an expert in something as you write.
Mhm.
It's just a little bit blurrier between the editorial content and the advertising.
Yeah.
But, whatever pays the bills.
Well, and the good news is it's not like you've been. I think sometimes you portray yourself as just going to school, and
Mhm.
you've had a internship with a local paper, which
Yeah.
is which is a real deal. Like it's not,
Yeah.
this isn't just some kind of fake journalism. This is
No,
a real newspaper that gets
yeah, and
done.
we
You have,
cover campus and the city.
yeah.
I've written many a
So,
thing. I mean, that's really what a journalism degree is about the job that you do, less about the classes that you take.
mm-hmm.
There's an investigative reporter, not that grades aren't important, but she says she's an investigative reporter in Kansas, I believe, and she said I had a 2.7 and I'm proud of it.
Listen, grades were only important to me when they had scholarships on the line, and we wiped those out pretty quick. So, like, I've just been, all I've really wanted to do is make through, like, just get through
do the
safe
thing,
and
learn the
sane.
stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are some jobs, there's some prestigious things that where GPA matters. It is that those things exist. Most of the other ones don't. They don't exist. Jim had said it earlier. Jim Shoemaker had said it earlier. It's really about who you know. It's your network of friends. It's the people that can help you get into those roles. I really think you're probably going to have to take a writing job somewhere first to kind of fill the gap until you find that journalism role that you want. And that's okay. You just need to keep writing.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you things to write about when you get here, just to keep, whether you choose to do that or not, it's going to be up to you. I'm not going to make you do anything, but I'm going to give you some things to start bolstering your resume with. If that's what you want to do, we're going to figure some things out. We'll probably get you a podcast started, so we get that media out there. We'll probably work on something for YouTube so that we can do some things. I'll get involved in some of it where you want me to. I will stay out of things where you don't want me to. But it'll just be, just be one of those things. Dave is asking in the chat room, where do you blog? If right now, really you're spending all your time on the paper, right?
Yep.
So Northwest Missourian. How do people find that work at the paper?
If you go to nwmissourinews.com, I believe that is our website. And if you just type in my last name into the search bar, it'll pull up things that I've written. But you can also, we have an issue issuu.com, I believe. That's where we've been hosting our digital content. We produce basically a physical paper. We just don't print it. We put the PDF online. So you can also see our physical things there with all the pretty graphics and you can click through and read the stories.
Yeah.
It looks nice and presentery.
And they're I read them all the time. They're great. They're great to read.
You can also follow me on Twitter. I retweet the stuff that I write on Twitter at Sammie Collison.
Well, you have an advantage with this audience because they're on. Many of them are on Twitter as well. I'm going to have you try and write some text stuff just to see where it sticks. I had kind of thought about having you do reviews. We've talked about this before, but I think tonight I've kind of thought like, well, okay, maybe reviews aren't the place, but some tech stories from other people's opinions, right?
We need the story.
Yeah, reaching out to other
people. Where's the personal aspect? I think the thing that we need to do is, because I have so many interests, I think we just need to put them all on a board and find a through line that we can produce like a season of content with. I think that's the thing, is like finding a through line of things that I'm interested in have in common. Because there's like the crafting world, the book world. I know a ton about online fandom. Like that's a thing that I don't really talk about that much, but I have a ton of expertise in just being in fandom sphere since like 2012. There's just a lot that I know that I'm just like not utilizing. And I think we just need to find a through line of things that I can talk about and types of people that I can interview.
Well, here's the good news.
Right now my energies are really spread.
Yeah, they are. And that's okay. Like that's okay. I think there's some great opportunities. Here's the good news. Rent is cheap. Food is free. The neighborhood is safe. So like for now, all those things, all those basic needs are being met.
I got a safety net, thank goodness.
It's kind of why I don't worry about it too much. And yet I get kind of excited about kind of helping you until you tell me to stop. I kind of get excited about helping you like get this thing kind of rolling. I'm gonna, kind of held back a little bit. I pushed for a while as a freshman and sophomore. I wanted to push, And then I got a sense like now is not the time, so I pulled way back. And I'll look forward to giving you some opportunities. I think as we look at summer 2021, I think I'll probably still be home working by that point. I don't know, but
A lot of people
we'll
have learned that a lot of jobs can be done from home, and a lot of meetings could have been an email.
yeah. Well, although I do differ with you on that. While it could be email, I don't think that's the
Yeah,
best. I still think,
he's an
yeah,
extrovert. I'm an introvert. That's where
uh,
he and I differ.
yeah. I just think lots lost in the translation on email, and I think sometimes you need that
I'm
face to
just so
face.
much more eloquent in email. I can just
Just,
condense it into
I
a
know,
nice little
yeah. Well,
paragraph.
maybe you'll bring some writing to the average guy.tv like it has never seen
Yeah.
before, and
I'll be your written word.
I'll take a few guest posts from you, and we'll kind of see where it goes. So,
I
well,
joke that it's the
Sammie,
podcast nepotism,
yeah, look, well, we got to look out for each other in this, right? I
but
mean,
in a
I
good
think we're,
way.
yeah, no, right on.
I mean, it's not
I
like you got a small loan of $1 million from anybody. You built this from the ground up.
Well, and it's not like I'm making any money off this thing. Let's just be very, very transparent.
We'll
Like,
be real. We're
the
doing it for the
average
love of it.
the average guy.tv exists only because, I mean, listen, I've got some great folks on Patreon. If you want to support the network, the average guy.tv/Patreon. I haven't said that over the last couple podcasts, but if that helps, that always helps. And it's great to have Patreon subscribers and supporters. But that necessarily that's not why I do this. It's a different, I exist to help other people and to help other people tell their stories, right? To have guests on and tell other people's stories and have interesting people. I have figured out I'm a better amplifier of other people than I am of myself. And so in that pulls me along, but it's just really, really important to kind of do this for other people. So we'll have, I think by summer, by the time we kick around, we'll have some new things to start. I think for listeners here of Home Gadget Geeks, you might want to watch out. There could be some fun things. Or she finds a job and does something more interesting, and I get
Who
nothing.
knows?
I get nothing,
We
but
shall see.
that's just fine. Well, Sammie, anything else? Anything I missed? Anything else you want to say on this? I think we can wrap
I
this
don't think
thing. But
so.
any other thoughts?
Pretty much all the followers know about my Twitter, but I'll boost it again at Sammie Collison on Twitter. That's where my professional stuff is. Follow me there.
SAMMIE
Collison.
COLLISON.
That's me.
That's her on Twitter. If you want to follow her there, and I'm always surprised at the traction that's still on Twitter. You're
Yeah.
kind of like, interesting. If you want to follow me at Jay Collison, I've been retweeting some stuff, and of course, lots of things going on tonight around this. And I always appreciate Joe and Tony doing some retweets. John did as well. Appreciate you guys retweeting that stuff as well. I mentioned the Patreon group. If you want to join us, I'm setting up a January Patreon meetup again. So if you want to join us in December for that, you can jump in theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. I mentioned Discord earlier, and man, we've had some fun over the last couple weeks. I've kind of committed to every candle that I light. You guys know what that means. I'm going to post a picture of that in the candle. It's not what it's called, but it's called Scar in the Discord group. And so if you want to join us over there for that conversation, theaverageguy.tv/Discord, or any of the tech conversation, there's some great stuff going on. Kevin Schoonover's posting online deals, and I'm thinking about Bust Out, who's posting out there all the time. Justin Simmons is posting out there. Appreciate you guys doing that. theaverageguy.tv/Discord. Leave that message for me for the show next week. You got to do it pretty quick here. homegadgetgeeks.com is the way to get that done. You can contact the show. Send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. If you got an idea or you want to share a story, by the way, just send me an email. And I'll consider you. I can't take everybody, but I'll consider you to be on the show. Send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. If you do want to join our Facebook group, you can do that as well. Facebook.com/groups/theaverageguy, or you can just go to theaverageguy.tv/Facebook. Will that get you there? Big thanks to Christian Over at Maple Grove Partners, get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. And of course, that's Christian over at Maple Grove Partners. Visit Maple Grove Partners, all one word.com. And while you're there, sign up for sign up for a Hover account, because it's not free. Sign up for a Hover account, theaverageguy.tv/hover. Get $2 for new customers, $2 off your first domain, and get some great hosting while you're out there as well. And join us next Thursday. 10 years. Sammie, you were
I
like,
was 12 years old.
I know. What were you doing when you were 12? What was going on?
I was in middle school.
Yeah, eighth grade? Was that 8th grade for you?
That would have been 7th grade. 6th grade, 7th grade. Around that
Who were the popular bands in 7th grade for you?
Lady Gaga was just becoming a thing. Like Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, like Born This Way was just happening. And now here we are.
10 years later. 10 years later. Well, what's not 10 years later is the end of the show. So we are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, including next week. We are live. Join us live if you come out here to theaverageguy.tv/live. We'll get you there as well. Fun show coming up next week. Sammie, thanks for coming on. It's always fun to catch up with you. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We will see you all next week. A little short post show if you're listening live. Thanks for joining us. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.